Hey guys, welcome back to the Another Excuse podcast, where we chat to founders, creators, and self-starters about how they started and where they are now. Today's guest is Pete Hansell, the founder of Isla. Isla is a healthcare startup that focuses on configuring and automating efficient remote care pathways across all specialties. We had a really interesting conversation, and we talked about things like what motivated Pete to start Isla, the challenges and valuable lessons learned so far, the importance of building a great company culture, how you use user feedback to grow your company, funding, entrepreneurship, and many more topics. This was a fascinating conversation about a very interesting topic. I enjoyed it. I'm sure you will too. Enjoy the show. Hi, Pete. Thanks for joining me today. Just to get started and to get a bit of context, could you tell us a bit about yourself and your journey that got you to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Baron. Great to be on here. Very, very nice way to start the day. I'm Pete Hansell, co-founder and CEO of a digital health startup called Isla, named after my dog, which I think helps to make it a little bit memorable and stand out in a busy space of acronym-based names. So I've worked in healthcare really kind of most of my professional life. I find it just the most fascinating, rewarding, challenging sector, and such a lot of very high level, very impactful problems that need to be solved. So I think that's a large part of my motivation for sort of why health. Very briefly, my pathway to here was I did engineering at university and then went from there into a consulting job, which was tough, very hard work for anyone who's done consulting. I'm sure it's a similar experience, lots of late nights in hotels around the country. From that into a digital health startup, which was great, learned a lot there. Little segue into starting a fashion business, and that took me to 4 years ago, where I started Isla with my co-founder.
Awesome. And so what is Isla? How does Isla work?
So we're really trying to totally overhaul the operating model for healthcare. And at the moment, kind of by and large, healthcare systems are built on this kind of model of bringing patients into hospital to sit down with a specialist every 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 3 months, depending on the clinical pathway. That varies, but the model is the same. You bring patients from home, you sit them down in a consulting room with a specialist, you try and understand what's happened to that patient and their story since you last saw them, and then you make the best clinical decision you can. And then normally that's an intervention, or we need to monitor for a longer period. And so we repeat that cycle and bring the patient back in. We think there's a huge opportunity to shift from that fundamental model to flowing information from patients continuously. And what we're looking for are signs that somebody's condition is developing and changing, or signs which we can highlight to clinicians, which will allow them to make a clinical decision sooner. And so we've built a platform which, across really any medical specialty, we're able to capture information from patients or from family members or from whoever it is, flow that into the system and present that to doctors and nurses in a way that allows them to make a decision much more quickly and without having to direct the patient into a physical setting.
Amazing. And are you building an app, or is it more of a web-based app? How does that work?
Yeah, so we kind of early on, we made the decision to build a web app. That I think has been a very good decision. There are some technical limitations to what you can do with a web app, but it's technology which has been pushed really hard by Google and others. So I suppose in many ways we're benefiting from the investment that those kind of huge players are putting into web app technology. The benefit for us and for patients is that it's so much lower friction. So we've all got thousands of apps on our phone. The last thing that you want is you develop a condition, you need to see a specialist in a particular pathway in a particular hospital. You don't want to have to go and download yet another app to try and monitor that condition. So building as a web app means it's super low friction. As a patient, you get a link from Isla by text message or email. Normally, you click that link, we walk you through exactly what we need from you. You hit submit, and that's it. You're done. So yeah, that was a technical decision made not by me, but by better qualified technical people when we started the business. I think it's been a good move.
It sounds like a good move. And so your first business, you touched on it slightly, was completely different to Isla and the healthcare space. What did you learn from the first business that was transferred over to Isla?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question. So yeah, it really was. It really couldn't have been more different. So and actually this probably wasn't my first business, but it was my first. It's my first business that had any potential, and I took seriously as an adult, I suppose. So that business was called Masai Color, and it was a fashion label, which was aiming to be kind of Africa's first very premium fashion label. And so it started with a couple of friends of mine, and we based it in Nairobi. And it was the whole kind of principle of the business was try and build a very ethically rooted business. So we paid salaries which were about 2.5 times the kind of market normal in Kenya, or in that industry in Kenya. We sourced all of our goods locally. We built a small workshop in downtown Nairobi. It was a fascinating and amazingly exciting business to try and build. We got to some level of success. We were selling across kind of premium lodges and safari camps in Kenya, in Tanzania, Zimbabwe. But the thing we never really cracked was getting kind of a big enough marketing presence to be able to sell online, and particularly sell online in Europe or in the West. So yeah, that was the challenge. That was the thing we never really overcame. We got as far as doing a Kickstarter campaign, that was quite successful. We raised 25K doing that, but that was kind of the last hurrah for the business. Really, we spent our money making amazing products to fulfill that kind of Kickstarter project, and then from there we realized we probably didn't have the expertise to grow it into a huge business. What did I learn though? I think probably the most valuable thing there was just how crucial it is to do something that you care about. So, and for me that was interesting because I don't particularly care about fashion. I'm not a particularly fashionable guy, I wouldn't say. But I was really passionate, and still am really passionate about how you can build businesses which have massively impactful kind of or a massively beneficial social impact. And that was what I think we got right at Masai Color. We had a small team. There were 6 of us, but everyone was super pumped to be in the business. It made a real difference to people's lives. So the team's lives in Kenya. Martin, one of the tailors, he put his kids through school because of the job in Masai Color and wasn't previously going to be able to do that. So those sorts of things were huge for me. But I suppose the lesson was just really caring isn't enough. You also need to understand the sector and kind of have a background and some experience in that sector so that you know which problems to tackle and how to start tackling them.
And the healthcare sector and the problem you're tackling seems like quite a big one. So why tackle such a huge problem?
Yeah. I sometimes ask myself that question. I suppose because it needs tackling, right? The healthcare system is, I think, one of the most, if we focus just on the UK, I think it's one of the most valuable institutions that we have in this country. It's an absolute lifeline for all sorts of people from all sorts of walks of life who are managing illness, ill health, complex conditions, which would in countries without a functioning national health service would just be hugely expensive to manage. And so where in the UK those illnesses are obviously totally life-changing, they're life-changing but there's a safety net of the NHS. And as ill health, or as conditions become more and more complex and actually, ironically, better and better managed, people live longer with those conditions, and there's more treatment options, and those treatment options are expensive, and there's more demand placed on the health system, and so we're really just not keeping up with the demand that is, and the pressure which is being placed on the National Health Service. And so I think for me, it's about trying to maintain that institution which I think is so valuable, and working towards an operating model which just allows us to massively streamline the way that we deliver that care. Because if we get that bit right, then we unlock the capacity in the system to be able to deliver the same service for the next generation and the generation after that. So yeah, it's very kind of why tackle the problem? Well, because I think it's fundamental to building a health system which is still going to be here in 10 years.
And you mentioned that you had experience in healthcare, and that's kind of what gravitated you towards this industry. But was there some sort of catalyst or something that really inspired you to focus on this particular problem?
Yeah, so I think my very earliest kind of interest in healthcare probably started in early childhood. So I grew up with my dad managing multiple sclerosis, which is a lifelong condition and involves treatment and kind of care from all sorts of bits of the health system. So we had nursing teams who would come in to the house once a week. We had carers who were fantastic, who would come and help him get dressed in the morning and come and help him get to bed at night. And so probably for kind of most of my childhood, that was just something that was around the family kind of every day. We were super reliant on social care services and NHS services. And what he's a fascinating man. He's a violin maker in rural North Yorkshire, probably the only one for hundreds of miles around, I think. But I think what really inspired me to sort of, or what really made me interested and gave me such a sense of how valuable the NHS is that really his main kind of focus in life is his business. Like he works now, he's over 60, he still goes to work every day. He's a craftsman and just makes these incredibly like beautiful instruments. And seeing him kind of pulled away from that by his illness was something which I think was a problem that I saw as something that could be fixed just with better technology and with better kind of operational processes, and B, something which is really valuable to fix because it's hard enough managing a chronic condition, but when that chronic condition impacts your life much more than it needs to and pulls you away from doing the thing that you love, once every week to travel halfway across Yorkshire to get to the specialist neurology department in Newcastle, that isn't necessarily the right way to deliver that service. And if there are better ways to do that, where it takes 15 minutes and you can stay at home and my dad can be back doing what he loves, shortly after, then that just seemed like a really good thing to solve. So I think that was kind of where it started for me. And then, yeah, as I said, I went into consultancy, focused on health straight away as soon as I went to that business. Learned a lot there about how hospitals actually work and the complexities in and kind of why that problem exists to such an extent. And I guess it was coming together of wanting to solve the problem, an experience which gave me an insight into how I might actually do that, and those two things coalescing sort of with the impetus to then launch Isla.
And so was there always an intention to start a business in healthcare? So you seem pretty intentional about going into the healthcare while consulting, and I'm just wondering if you always thought you may start something in healthcare.
I don't know if I did, I always knew I'd start something. I think from very young, entrepreneurship just thrilled me. The idea of building something which is new, starting a business, creating something and bringing it to the world as a new offering, I just found super exciting. So yeah, I had businesses from I had weird, crazy business. I used to like I think my first was I was about 11. I used to steal logs from the woodshed, um, from my mum's woodshed, chop them up with a little axe into like kindling to light fires, and then I'd go around the village in in rural Yorkshire and sell them for twice the price. Um, until my mum realised all her logs would go missing. So yeah, that I had like all sorts of tiny little money making ideas, and I'd obsess about them as a kid. So I think all through university and through my childhood, I knew I wanted to start ventures and be an entrepreneur. Health, health was an enduring interest and I suppose a problem which I've always thought was a very very important one to try and solve. So that was certainly what took me into consulting. Um, it probably wasn't until a bit later when I met my co-founder and also worked in a digital health startup that I really sort of understood the potential for technology, because that was fairly foreign to me. I'd focused very much on operational change and the sorts of stuff that you do in a consulting company. So I was really good at the transformational bit, and I really didn't have much grasp of the potential for tech to be a massive part of that. So I think that realization that if you can bring together technology and a really good understanding of a problem and operationally how you tackle it, then you've got something very powerful. And that was probably the thing that I guess all of my interests then combined. So a problem I wanted to solve, a passion for starting businesses and being an entrepreneur, and then crucially kind of the people around me and the ability and enough of an understanding of technology to know how you might go and do that.
And I'm always intrigued by the actual starting of like a company, like taking that leap. What gave you the confidence that you were the one to solve this problem?
I don't think anything did. I think like I don't know if I even really have that confidence now. We're giving it a really good shot and it's going well. Um, and if not us, then who? I suppose is my mentality. We've got an incredibly like bright team of amazingly motivated people. Like there is no group of people that I've ever come across that are more likely to solve the problem than us. So I think you build the confidence, but yeah, did I come into this kind of with any sense that like I was in a special position to be able to solve this? I don't think I did. No, I think there's a degree of like you have to back yourself to be an entrepreneur, I suppose, but I think it's also very very healthy to go in with a healthy realization this might well not work, and you might be 3 years down the line and still plugging away and have made no progress. So I think you kind of need to be okay with that outcome to take the leap.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you mentioned how important the NHS is, but at the same time, it is a very complex, big government-run system, and so I imagine things move quite slowly. Is this something you considered when starting Isla?
Yes and no. I think I agree. It's a hugely complex and like convoluted system to try and navigate around. And I think that whilst that comes with quite a lot of challenges, it also accelerates. I guess to answer the question better, I think I was aware of the pros and cons and kind of weighed them up sufficiently that it seemed like an okay place to start. So the pros of throwing yourself into a like super complex, super sophisticated organization is that if you're building a kind of enterprise level solution, then you're forced to really get to that level very, very quickly. So the first year of us building was, compliance, regulation, and understanding procurement frameworks, and just getting some of the fundamental layers of product that you need before you can even start to deliver any kind of product value. But then that's good, right? In many ways, because you're then set up for to sell to big organizations. And if you can sell to NHS, then you can sell within reason or you can at least adapt your offering to sell to pretty much any hospital anywhere in the world. So yeah, those are the pros. The cons are, it often feels slow, like it would selling or building a business which is direct to consumer or something like that is, I mean, the grass is always greener, I think, for every entrepreneur, but there's something really exciting about that, where, you know, you get your marketing right, you get your product right, and you can kind of hit this like organic growth trajectory, which is super exciting. I think to an extent you can do that in enterprise sales in big complex organizations, but it's definitely not, you know, it's not the same. You're not going to release a video which is going to go viral, and every executive in every hospital is going to, you know, implement your solution. That just isn't how it works. So yeah, pros and cons, but I think we weren't blind to it. We were probably blind to some of the challenges, but in a way that's what makes it fun, right?
Yeah, true. And how did the company start? What problem did you guys decide to tackle first? Because I can imagine you can't build a whole suite of different verticals in healthcare. I imagine you tackle a few problems first and then build out from there.
Yeah, exactly. So we started, I mean, maybe it's because both my co-founder and I are engineers. I think we started in probably the most like boring, methodical way that you can imagine. So we sat down in the Parcel Yard, which is a pub just above King's Cross Station, and spent about 4 or 5 hours writing down like pretty much everyone who was in our network, who was a nurse or a doctor or a carer, or someone who had someone with a chronic condition in their family and who was looking after them, or anyone who we thought might have a chance of knowing any of those people. And we ended up with this very long list of just like people that we thought we could go and talk to. And that was really kind of, I guess, our research phase was, let's just immerse ourselves as much as possible in talking to frontline people who look after and manage healthcare systems. And then we did that probably pretty quickly over a period of a month. And we wrote down every bit of insight, every problem that people came back with. And we then kind of bucketed that up, and there were like tons of problems to solve. But I guess the one that seemed both simple enough and like a slightly crazy that it hasn't already been solved properly was how you was being able to present like media data. So being able to present photos and videos, which are very, very powerful, highly descriptive media types or highly descriptive data points to monitor a condition, taking that and presenting that in a clinical context safely and kind of intuitively. Like no one had really got that bit right. So we went through our list of problems, and we found that like that problem was a component part of so many different challenges in the health system. Fundamentally, in like the very simplified view of healthcare, what you're trying to do is start with a patient who could have really anything in the world wrong with them. They go to primary care. Primary care does this amazing job of like narrowing down. You've walked through the door. Okay, you definitely don't have any of those things, and you might have one of these things. So either we'll make a decision, we'll start treatment, or we'll pass you on to a specialist, now with a much narrower scope of what that could be. Specialist takes you and says, okay, you could have any of these things, and we need to work out like what the most likely thing is. And that's a series of tests and monitoring symptoms and possibly referring off for other specialist input. And so really what we're trying to do is like take that, we kind of pick up at the point of that primary care hands over, at least at the moment. That's likely to change soon. We take that slice of things that this could be, and we go, okay, let's collect all of the information from you as a patient to be able to then present to the clinician and say, you've asked us for all of this data, here it is. The most likely scenario is this patient has this, and that you should consider treatment options that align to that. And so we found that photos, videos, sound recordings coming directly from patients could be a massive part of narrowing down that slice and deciding what the right thing to do is. So that was where it started. Basically, it was a very, very simple like photo transfer solution where we could ping out a link to you, you click it. At the time, there was like zero security or kind of anything wrapped around this. You click it, you take a photo, you hit send, and magically it pops up on screen. We went and demoed that to a couple of people who were pretty unimpressed, I would say.
And in startup books like The Lean Startup, the author emphasizes like how important it is to distinguish between vanity metrics and numbers just going up and looking for metrics that actually tell a story. What role did user feedback play in shaping the platform's features and capabilities?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think we really tried to steer, or I guess tried to stay very aware of that like risk of vanity metrics, because it happens at every stage of the business, right? It happens when you start and you get something that seems to go well and you latch onto it because you think, oh, this is fantastic. We're on a rocket ship here. And then it happens when you're fundraising as well. You're honing in on the metrics that are looking really great. And I think less so now, but to some extent, kind of venture capital and things used to get unnecessarily excited about things like headcount growth. So, oh, fantastic! You're X people, or you're growing at 20% headcount, like month on month. Those are vanity metrics for sure. So for us, we started just by like wanting to get our technology into the hands of frontline users as quickly as possible. We've already tried a bit about the challenges there, because you have to have a fairly sophisticated product to be able to get through the front door in an NHS hospital. So that probably wasn't as quick as we'd like, but I would say within 8-9 months of starting the business, we had enough that a couple of hospitals were prepared to give us a go. And so from there, we then were kind of in like working every day with clinical teams on the ward, going out to do community visits with them, shadowing them, watching where they would use our tech, watching when they tried to, what would go wrong, watching where they were actually like struggling with a different problem which we haven't even considered, or which we weren't helping to address at all. So yeah, those days of like pitching, shadowing, spending your whole time just trying to get someone to talk to you and plying them with coffee and chocolates and anything you can do to kind of take a couple of moments out of like very busy people's day to get feedback. That was super essential. And
did you guys run into any technical challenges? And if so, what were they?
Yeah, we did, and still frequently do. So I remember very very early we had one technical challenge, which is that I deleted accidentally pretty much the whole kind of like infrastructure for Isla. It wasn't particularly sophisticated infrastructure at the time, but that was a terrifying moment. I had more access than I should into kind of back end like systems. We weren't live with any hospital, so there wasn't kind of a risk with patient data, but the work that we'd done to get to that point was a risk. So luckily we managed to recover all that, but that was a pretty terrifying moment, I think, for the four of us that were in the business at that stage. Yeah, I mean, we've had all sorts of technical challenges. One of the big challenges with healthcare is there's so many systems already incumbent in hospitals that are relied on day to day. Some of them are decent. A lot of them are like very, very archaic, difficult to use systems, kind of widely loathed by their users. But nonetheless, just are the underlying infrastructure. And so one of the big challenges we have had and continue to have is like integrating sufficiently into those systems. And there's not always good kind of market drivers there, because some of these incumbent systems are wanting to protect a space which, they want to expand into, or they think they're solving, but they're not. And so, yeah, that's a definite challenge.
I can
And
imagine.
that won't be just healthcare, right? I think that probably goes for working in any big enterprise space where there's a lot of incumbent platforms already.
Yeah. And you mentioned that you started Isla with a co-founder. How did you guys decide to work together? And do you think it's important to have a co-founder?
Yeah, for sure. I don't think I would. I don't think I could have done this in so many ways without my co-founder James. So we have very different skill sets. That's one thing which is super useful. I'm more focused on the kind of customer and growth side of the business, and James is focused on technical and product side. So I think being able to just segment the business and segment part of the stress is like an absolute game changer. So he worries about, I mean, we both obviously worry about most of it, but we have quite clear delineation and lines of responsibility. So his problem set is over here, and my problem set is over here, and we share and talk about it all the time. But at least you're not trying to worry about and be across every part of the business all at the same time. So there's that, and then I think there's just the like emotional support and a resilience piece, which is really, really necessary. Like if you're having a rough day, something's gone wrong, you wanted some deal to go a certain direction, or you wanted a partnership and it hasn't happened, like that can really knock you. And then you get on a call with your co-founder, at least in the early days. Now it's across the whole team, I would say, but in the early days, you get a call with your co-founder, and they go, "Oh, I'm just having a great day. We've just done X, Y, and Z," and it's like, thank God. I think that balancing of like someone's having a shocker day and someone's having a great day just smooths the ride out a little bit. So yeah, I think co-founder for sure. I think the other part of your question was like, how did we decide on who was going to do what and how we we're going to work together? So that we decided very early. I just think it was James who did this. He kind of wrote down he had a flight, and he spent the flight writing down like his thoughts on how we should structure the early part of the business. So he sent me this like 3-pager that laid out all of his self reflections on strengths and weaknesses. And we used that, and then I did the same, and we used those 2 documents, and we came together and we just said, okay, like this is the natural fit. You're going to be CEO and I'll be COO. That was our initial split, and then those roles have kind of changed a little bit, and James moves across to sort of CTO and COO at the moment. But yeah, it was a very stress-free process for us. I think as long as your skill sets are sufficiently different, it becomes obvious who should do what.
And did you guys have a good relationship before you started the business? I can imagine, and has that had an impact on your relationship now? I can imagine being in such like a high pressure situation and being responsible for employees and that type of thing, it can impact your relationship.
Yeah, definitely. James and I worked together at Newton, which is the consulting company that I mentioned. I think what was very helpful about that experience was we'd been through some tough, stressful stuff together. We'd worked on projects together that had at times gone really badly. We'd worked together till 2 a.m, putting together PowerPoint decks that we have to present at 7. Like we'd kind of been through some of the shit, excuse my language, already too. And so I knew how he would react, and that he would be there in those situations, and I guess he knew the same of me. So there was a fundamental, like, I think it's great to have worked together when you're looking for co-founder, just because you know what to expect, and you know whether someone operates at the level you do, whether they're whether they care about problems in the same way that you do. All of those things are very, very healthy checks. And then our friendship was, I suppose our friendship was an important part of it because it allows you to like switch off a bit from work when you need to, and you can just, go for a run together or like go for dinner together and try not to talk about the thing that you spent the other like 20 hours of the day talking about. So yeah, I think it sounds kind of calculated, but I think in order of importance, I would say working together and knowing professionally how we were going to operate was probably the most important thing. And the friendship that we'd had for many years was just a bonus on top. Because there are times where you just need to switch off and like revert to the foundation of the relationship and kind of use that to get you through stuff rather than, the fact that you're both professional and can hold it together.
Yeah, that seems extremely important, and just how important having a co-founder can be. And did you guys face any challenges when securing funding? How did that whole process work?
I think, yeah, we did for sure. The thing, we were massively helped in the early days by having a great network of founders around us who'd done this. So we raised our first money in January 2020. It was a kind of pre-seed round of angel investors. And yeah, we found, so James and I both had like some great connections with amazing founders who really kind of set us up for that. So made crucial key intros to like key angels who then later came on board and have supported us all the way through. They introduced us to loads of other founders who like had been in that same position and were willing to help. And so I think like that was the thing that went really well for us. And I would really recommend anyone who's kind of at the stage and raising pre-seed money, like invest in building a network of founders who've been there, because most people are really willing to help. I think most people recognize that it's a big ecosystem and you're going to be in a position where you need a favor from someone. So like reciprocate, and when you can help early stage founders, then, spend the half an hour on a call to talk them through some stuff or give us feedback or send the email to get them in front of that crucial person who they wouldn't be able to access. So yeah, that smoothed our path for sure. But your question was, did we have challenges? Yeah, I mean, we definitely had challenges. I think we've been kind of lucky in our timing because we haven't had to raise money in the last 12 months, and that's been a tough time for a lot of businesses. So I think probably we've not had quite as stressful a funding journey as some businesses, but yeah, there's definitely been challenges.
And you mentioned how important that network was for you guys to acquire funding. Were you intentional about building a network, or was it like, okay, we need funding, so we're just going to send out emails and messages to the people we know, or like secondary connections, and just see whoever takes us up on and jumps on a call?
That's a really good question. I think it was more the latter, to be honest. I don't know if we planned far enough ahead to be very intentional about building a network. Yeah, I think that was more good fortune than anything else. Like we had a network of people who'd gone on to start businesses. Maybe to an extent it comes from kind of where you've worked. So a lot of great founders have come out of kind of businesses that James and I have worked in previously, and so that was kind of the network. It's a good question though, because how would you do that if you didn't have that as in a pre-existing way? And I think there's definitely a different way to do it, which is to be much more intentional and start earlier and and actually, I see it happening. I regularly get LinkedIn messages from people wanting to start healthcare businesses who reach out and just say, "Can we get a coffee?" And the answer is not always yes, but very often it's yes. And let's chat through an idea, and that's the start of then a connection. So, yeah, I think whilst we probably weren't, because we were probably lucky, I think intentional network building is now something that I see as very valuable. So now I spend a lot of my time doing that.
Yeah, I can imagine it being extremely valuable. You never know when you may need someone in your network, and having that connection is so much easier than starting from scratch and just trying to find the right person. And speaking of the right people, how did you build your team at Isla? What do you look for while building a team?
We went very, very heavy on like talent rather than experience with the early team. And what I mean by that is like looking for people who have the same values and enthusiasm and passion and like all of the things that get me very excited about great people to work with, rather than looking for people who had a fantastic CV and who had already done this. So I think, again, there's pros and cons, and we're now starting to bring some more experienced people into the business, and that's having an impact. But in the early days, we were really just looking for like people who were hungry and had the resilience to get through what was going to be a tough like few years of really not knowing where we're going or too much what we were doing. And I think it's, people talk about hard work in startups. Like it is hard work, but it's so much harder work if you're not like super fired up about the thing you're doing. And so we looked for people who were very, very smart, very intrinsically interested and motivated by the problem we were solving. And I guess who had all of the character traits to be able to ride out those waves of difficult times and things go wrong and things go right. And, I guess who had the potential to then be future leaders of teams. And yeah, I can't overemphasize like how awesome our team is. I mean, your brothers in it, part of it, like it's incredible group of people. So committed to what we do. I find that whole group just inspirational to be around and like to work on problems with. So I think those are the ingredients that we look for, certainly, like raw talent and hunger, not experts who've done it before.
And what kind of impact have those early hires had on like the company culture? Have you had to try change the company culture at all, or you did so well hiring so early that they've sort of enabled a great company culture?
I think probably a bit of both. So certainly those early hires have like absolutely set the company culture, and you can see in different functions, like every part of the business or almost has its own culture to an extent, and often that's trickled down from people who started early. So yeah, they've been instrumental, I suppose, in setting that company culture. We talk about it and think about it, and actually we have one of our early hires was someone who came into a kind of people role and thought a lot about how we maintain the company culture that we started off with, because it's fine when you're 10 people, right? Like everyone's hanging out together in the office, everyone knows everything that's happening in the business. It's like all exciting, and you don't need to spend too much time talking about where you're going or the vision or why you started or like why, even though it's tough, this is such a valuable problem to be solving. I think now that we're 50, that's becoming more of a thing that we need to remind ourselves to spend time on. And so, yeah, the lady who heads up our people team has been very aware of that, I think, all the way through our growth. And so we're very proactive about maintaining the culture that we had when we started and that we want to have when we're 100 or 1,000 people. So I think it's the direction's definitely set by founders and by early employees, but then it's really shaped and maintained by like everyone who comes into the business. And I think as long as you create the right parameters where it's like people can express themselves and people have the authority to steer the business in different directions when they want to, that maintains the sense of like possibility that you can come into this company, you can become a massively important part of it, and actually if you don't like something, you can change it. Like that's what I think underpins a really great company culture.
And you mentioned that the team is now 50 people, so that's an amazing accomplishment, especially from the outside looking in. Many people would consider that a huge achievement. But do you ever feel imposter syndrome or any self-doubt, even though the company is the size that it is today?
Imposter syndrome, I don't think so, really. I suppose, and maybe I just haven't really taken time out to like reflect and think about that. But self-doubt, yeah, for sure. I think it's an interesting position as a founder because it's both obviously healthy to have, not to be swept away by people saying what a great achievement it is or how well the business is doing or any of those things. Like you need to have healthy self-doubt so that you keep reflecting on what things that aren't going right and what things that you need to be better. The balance, I think, is like being able to have that self-doubt, but then be able to also switch it off when you need to, because you become the figurehead for you become the person that a large number of people are looking to for their confidence that things are going well and things are going to be okay. And so I think the challenge that I'm seeing as we grow is how I manage my own self-doubt and frustrations and the difficult and real side of running a business, and then switch that off successfully to be able to make sure that the team are motivated and that the investors are still excited by what we're doing and still, and we have great investors, so it's not like it's just quite as calculated as they make it sound, but there's a responsibility to show a positive, confident exterior and manage the self-doubt that you wouldn't be human if you didn't have. So I think that's kind of the tension for me.
Yeah, I think that self-doubt is evident at every stage of your career. And it's just interesting that, like, as a founder, you just managing it with the responsibility of other people, and it's like an interesting dynamic. But what is the end goal for Isla? What are you guys striving towards?
So we really want to build Isla, I suppose, into a fundamental, like, sector-defining company across pretty much every health system in the world. That's a very lofty ambition, I guess. But whilst there's massive differences between health systems, every health system globally has the same underlying challenge, which is that it's getting more expensive to treat people, where there isn't the funds available to make that happen for the population that we have, and so quality of care and accessibility of care is dropping globally. And so I think there needs to be a fundamental shift to using technology and using an operating model which allows us to just massively scale up the efficiency of delivering healthcare, and we want to be a crucial part of that shift. So yeah, we focused on the UK really to date, but we're now just starting to kind of broaden out beyond the UK and look at other markets. So yeah, mountains to climb, but that's what we're aiming for. We want to be one of the fundamental companies that enables the technology shift to enable a changed operating model for healthcare.
And once you start your own thing, do you think it's difficult to switch back to being like someone else's employee? Do you feel like you could go back ever?
I think it's hard. Yeah, I think it's hard. I don't know whether it's, maybe it's something about being a founder and then going back to being an employee. I mean, I don't know if that's necessarily the thing that would stop me. I think I could go back to the right company. It would have to be a very early company, and I'd have to have autonomy, and I suppose the ability to really massively steer the direction that we're going in. I think that's the thing that's most important for me, is feeling that when I jump out of bed in the morning, I can, like, the day is unpredictable and we can end up somewhere very different to where we started. And in bigger businesses that I've worked in, it's difficult to hold on to that, I think.
Yeah, I can imagine that being really exciting. And what has been the most valuable lesson that you've learned so far on this Isla journey?
Oh, good question. I think it's resilience, probably. And it's like, that's a big kind of topic, isn't it? We could do a whole discussion just on that. But I've always felt that I'm fairly resilient, I suppose. But what starting a business and getting to this stage has like definitely taught me is that there's lots of different, there's so many different challenges that are going to come, that your resilience is tested in multiple different ways. And it's like, there's not really a safety net when you're running a business, right? No one's gonna rescue you if you make the wrong decisions consistently. And so I think being confident enough to keep charging forwards even when there's lots of uncertainty, and being resilient enough to do that enthusiastically and confidently, even when things inevitably sometimes go wrong. That's been the lesson, and that's the thing that I don't think you ever stop building as a founder. And there's definitely value. When I meet people who are much older than me or who've run businesses much longer, there's something in them that you see. There's battle scars and resilience, and that's very valuable.
Yeah, that does seem valuable, and it seems like that's a lesson learned from doing. It's not something you can read in a book. It's like you have to get those battle scars in order to gain that resilience. It's not just going to happen by reading something or watching a video.
Yeah, for sure.
And
for sure.
Do you think, well, you touched on how you started early on in entrepreneurship and selling the Kindle to your neighbors, but do you think entrepreneurship is inherent in us, or do you think it can be learned by our experiences?
Well, very question. I actually think it's quite inherent. Well, I suppose that there's definitely an inherent set of characteristics and traits in people which make them much more likely to take the leap and start a business and go at that to make it a success. So, having an appetite for risk, those sorts of things, I think they're possibly quite inherent. But your question was, like, can you learn to be an entrepreneur? I think a lot of the skills that you actually need to then do that well and lead a business well and grow a business well, I think they're learned for sure. So I would say there's something inherent about the character set that you need to be prepared to give up the job and take the risk. And then from there on, everything else is learned. I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think that makes perfect sense. And what do you think, this could be quite a tricky question, but what do you think is the one thing that all entrepreneurs need to have?
Phew. I think all entrepreneurs genuinely need to have a creative streak. Like there's something very, very creative about the process of building a business from scratch. And I think if you can zoom out, or if you're passionate about creation and passionate about building something, then almost just the process of like getting a business to a certain stage and seeing it grow, and each new challenge that comes with that is in itself so intrinsically rewarding that it's like that's what drives you, or that's a part of what drives you. So yeah, I think every entrepreneur probably is at some level a creator, and I think that's important.
Yeah, that is very important. A lot of the entrepreneurs I've spoken to are driven by that creation process, by like the love of the game rather than the outcome. And some have like exited their companies and sat on their hands for like 6 months, and then they're like, I need to do something else. Like I can't just sit around and live happily ever after. So before we end, I usually hand over the mic and ask if you have a question for me.
Cool. Yeah, I do. So thank you for doing this. It's super great to be on your podcast. I guess I'm interested in like what your motivation is and what you're doing here. Where do you see this going, and what's your interest in entrepreneurship?
Yeah, thank you for joining me. So I originally started the podcast because I was grappling with a whole lot of thoughts about like social conditioning and feeling that entrepreneurial streak in me, but grappling with like the fears of like, no, I'm meant to get a job and work that 9 to 5. And I'd been heavily influenced by that and almost getting frustrated by it. And so I'd discuss ideas and business ideas with people, but I wouldn't follow through with them. Maybe I was throwing them out into the ether and hoping some co-founder would grab one and be like, let's do it. But that wasn't the case. And so it started becoming a self-identity issue. And I was that guy who was like having ideas, telling people about them, and then doing nothing about it. And this podcast was one of those ideas. And I was like fed up, and I was like, screw it. I need to just like start this thing and hold myself accountable. And there's a few like meta reasons involved in that. One was like, it's an excuse to learn from really impressive people about entrepreneurship because I want to start my own thing. And it has to come out every week, no matter what. And so instead of having that co-founder, I now have this like external thing that's holding me accountable. And so that's why I just like started, I fell into it, and I was like, I have to release one every week. And I've released one every week for, I think it's 26, 27 episodes now. So that was the reason why I started, was just to learn. And I'd also been frustrated with, after teaching in Hong Kong, I'd sort of simplified my English, and vocabulary wasn't like coming to me right away. It was like on the tip of my tongue a lot, and I was getting frustrated with that. And so I knew I also wanted to find some sort of way to improve my speaking. So this was just like a combination of like a whole lot of things, because I knew the vocabulary was there somewhere deep in the depths of my mind, but I needed to just put in the reps and speak more frequently and speak to people and learn. And so it's just a combination of a whole lot of skills that I wanted to get better at. And I felt like this was the best way. And so that's why I started. I don't have any like other intentions. Everything else that possibly could come, like if I could monetize this and those type of things, would be an added bonus. But the benefit I've already gotten from just improving my speaking, my like self-image of holding myself accountable and actually like showing up every week has been extremely important. And then learning from people like yourself about your journey, what it takes to take that leap, whether you grappled with any fears, all those type of things are like questions I'm genuinely curious about. And so this whole process, I've loved every second. And like, I think I'll reassess at 52 episodes once I do a year and see where I stand. But I'm not really going to consider stopping or changing anything until I get to episode 52.
Yeah. Very cool. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for joining me today, Pete. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I'm really looking forward to following the rest of Isla's journey. So how can people find out more about Isla and you, and where can they do so?
Yeah. So yeah, the website's isla.health. We're the office is in Moorgate. So for Londoners, then just show up, come and get a coffee with us. There'll always be someone who is happy to spend 20 minutes, half an hour and chat through what they know. So yeah, that's probably the best way. There's contact emails on the website that come to me or to anyone on the team.
Great. Well, thanks again for joining me, Pete. Thanks for listening. I really appreciate you making it all the way to the end. I hope you enjoyed the episode. One more quick reminder before you go. I have a weekly newsletter by the same name, Another Excuse, where I cover 4 topics: something that has changed my perception, a tool that could be useful to you, content that is actually worth consuming, and a concept that I try break down and explain. If this sounds of any interest to you and you need a kick up the arse, then you can subscribe at the link below. Thanks for joining me again, and I'll see you next week.